Hello guys, and welcome to Mr. Valentin's YouTube video for the tragedy of Macbeth, Act 2. We're going to go over some literary terms and some basic plot points and some other information that maybe wasn't covered on the V-Notes. If you have a notebook and you have your book available, that'll be helpful during this video. Alright, first up is important literary terms. So we're in Act 2, which means we're in the complication of the story. Remember, the complication are the events leading to the climax. So keep that in mind. Alright, where these events that occur in our story give us the end result of the climax. So this is all building up to something much bigger. So we, again, are building up to the climax, which is the highest point of action. We're again going to see many soliloquies, which remember are types of monologues, long uninterrupted speeches, where the character is alone on stage. So if a character is alone on stage, usually that indicates that we're having a soliloquy. We're going to see many illusions with an I. Alright, illusions are false images, things that are not actually there, things like ghosts or imaginary things. We will continue to see many allusions. Remember, allusions are references to famous historical or literary, can be from literature, person, places, or things. And we will be seeing similes, which are comparison using like or as. We'll also see omens, which we saw in the last scene. Alright, omens are signs from the heavens, alright, from the gods or God, alright, so prophetic signs. We're also going to have our first instance of comic relief. Comic relief alleviates the tone, alright, relieves the tension of the play. We're going to have metaphors, which remember are like similes except they don't use like or as. So comparisons that do not use like or as. We're going to see verbal irony through and through. Remember, verbal irony is when a character says one thing but means the opposite. And then finally we'll also see some personification. And personification is giving lifelike qualities to non-living or inanimate objects. So those are the big literary terms you should know for Act 2. Act 2, Scene 1. Important characters for Act 2, Scene 1 are Banquo, Fleance, and Macbeth. In case you don't remember, it's possible you don't, alright, Banquo is Macbeth's best friend. We also want to remember that he also received prophecies, alright, and his prophecy was that his sons or his children will become kings. He himself will not, but his children will. According to the witches, that is, alright, and we shouldn't necessarily believe. Not all of the witch's prophecies will come true, so keep that in mind. So we're introduced to Fleance. Fleance is Banquo's son. All right, and he's young, presumably. Usually in portrayals, he's nothing but 10 years old. On the older side, maybe 13. The text doesn't really indicate how old he is, but the idea is that he's very young. As for Macbeth, Macbeth's a whole other slew. All right, remember, he's the Thane of Glamis. He's become the Thane of Cawdor, and his prophecy said he will be King of Scotland. And at this point, he's like a pretty nice dude. Like, we haven't really seen anything. While he internalizes, all right, he has internal conflict. So another vocabulary word we haven't seen in a while. Literary term. All right, whoops. He has internal conflict about whether to kill King Duncan. It doesn't really seem like he's going to go through with it. That is, until this scene. So, that being said, Act 2, Scene 1 begins with Banquo and Fleance. And they're speaking, and Banquo says that he feels there's something strange with the night. Around line 5 of the play, he says, "Hold, take my sword, there's husbandry in heaven." Husbandry means like thrift. "Their candles are all out. Take thee that too," or give me something to hold. "A heavy summons lies like lead upon me." So we see a simile here, all right, with the use of like, all right, a heaven summons lies like lead upon me. All right, he wants to sleep, but he can't. All right, he's having issues. So Macbeth walks out and bumps into Banquo. And here we have a little bit of situational irony for just a moment, all right, because Banquo gives Macbeth a jewel, and the jewel is for his wife, Lady Macbeth, because Duncan has been so impressed with the way Lady Macbeth has been acting. So you get a little bit of situational irony, dramatic irony too, because we as the audience realize that Lady Macbeth has been plotting the murder. So Macbeth reassures them that everything's fine, that he should go to sleep, and Banquo says, "I can't. I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters." That's around line 20. All right. And so he's a little distressed, but Macbeth reassures him. He says, "Good repose the while," around line 29, which means rest easily, go to bed, my friend. And they continue. And so Macbeth is left alone on stage. And if a character's alone on stage, what does this mean? And of course we know this signifies to us as the audience a soliloquy. All right? So in this soliloquy, we kind of see Macbeth losing it a little bit. His mental ability is fractured. And this picture right here shows Macbeth kind of reaching his hand out. So as he gives this soliloquy, he's kind of walking on stage. And the first thing he says is, and this is around line 333 and following, "Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand?" He imagines, he sees an illusion of a dagger. And the dagger is leading him around stage, and ultimately, this dagger is going to bring him to Duncan's chamber. And he realizes that this is not good, all right? He shouldn't be seeing things. He knows this isn't real. He says, "Art thou not fatal vision?" So Macbeth in this scene acknowledges that this is not real, all right? That he has, quote, the heat-oppressed brain. He has a fever. He's problematic. And as he's following this imaginary dagger, he pulls out his real dagger. And he continues, he says, "Mine eyes are made the fools." All right, now there's some personification because your eyes can't be made fools. Right, your eyes aren't living things per se. So he continues to follow it, and he says, "Nature seems dead." He makes an allusion to Hecate, and this is a very important allusion. All right, Hecate. All right, so make note of her if you haven't. Hecate, again, in illusion, is the goddess. She's the goddess of a bunch of things. She's the goddess of night. She's the goddess of darkness. She's the goddess of sorcery. And most importantly, she's the goddess of discord. Discord's like, it doesn't quite mean chaos, but it's close to it. So go with chaos as your definition, but discord is entirely chaos. It's the greatest chaos of them all. It's destruction. So when he references her, we should be frightened. And then a bell rings, and Macbeth says, "I go, and it is done." And we have to question to ourselves, what is done? What does he mean by this? Is the death of Duncan done? Is his fever done? Like, what's going on here? And he says, "The bell invites me," as if the bell wants him to go kill. He says, "Hear it now, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell." All right. So this is a creepy moment because the bell, it just kind of invokes something within him that's terrifying. And so that ends Act 2, Scene 1. Act 2, Scene 2 begins with Lady Macbeth. And I'm going to get to this picture in a moment. Act 2, Scene 2 starts with a soliloquy from Lady Macbeth, and she talks about drugging the guards as part of the master plan. All right, we talked about this in the inciting incident. She says, "I have drugged their possets." And she hears Macbeth in the distance, and she says, and we kind of see a human side of her when she says this very important quote. She says, "Had he not resembled my father?" All right, so we find out that Duncan, as he slept, resembled her father. All right, so she says, "Had he not resembled my father, I had done it." All right, as he slept. So she wanted to kill him, but she couldn't. She was too weak. All right, and Duncan resembled too much of her father. So we see a human side of Lady Macbeth. So Macbeth comes in. Now, since we're reading this and listening to a recording, we don't really get to see it, but Macbeth comes onto the stage bloodied, all right, distraught, freaking out, all right? He's terrified at what he's done, and he comes in with daggers, and this would be easier to see than when we listen to it, and we kind of have to figure this out. And so the first thing Macbeth says is, "I have done the deed." And obviously the deed that he's talking about is the deed of killing Duncan. So this is a frightening moment. All right. And Lady Macbeth says, "I heard the owls scream and the crickets cry. Do you not speak?" And there's this quick dialogue. Macbeth says, "When?" Lady Macbeth says, "Now." Macbeth says, "As I descended." She says, "I." He says, "Hark, who lies in the second chamber?" She says, "Donalbain." All right, so it's this quick kind of rapid language. They're panicked. They can't believe they went through with it. And we as the audience maybe are shocked that Macbeth went through with it. We see some strong kennings here. Remember, kennings is a two-word poetic renaming of someone or something. Macbeth says, "One cried, 'God bless us,' and amen the other, as they had seen me with these hangman's hands." All right, so hangman hands mean like bloodied hands. The hangman would often disembowel and quarter the prisoner he had hanged. So this is kind of a little bit of an illusion, but it's strong kennings that he's referring to his hands as the hangman hands. And you see Macbeth lose it. His sanity is totally distraught, which I like this picture. He looks terrified in it. He says, "Methought I heard a voice cry, 'Sleep no more, Macbeth does murder sleep.'" All right, the innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve. And Lady Macbeth is listening to him, and the first thing she says is, "What do you mean? What are you going on about? I don't understand." And Macbeth continues with his lunacy. He says, "Still it cried, 'Sleep no more,' to all the houses. Glameth hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more." So Macbeth doesn't think he'll ever recover from this. And Lady Macbeth says, "Who was it that cried?" And he continues to just panic, and he says, "There's so much blood upon me." And Lady Macbeth finally, realizes, "You dum-dum, you have these daggers." She says, "Go get some water and wash these filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go, carry them and smear the sleeping grooms with blood." All right, she's saying, "Stop it, knock it off, all right? You've got to go fix this." And Macbeth says, "I'll go no more. I will not do it. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again, and I dare not." So Macbeth is distraught about the whole scene. And so this could be filmed as two ways, or shown on stage as two ways. So we have this scene where it's kind of Macbeth terrified. But there's a chance that Lady Macbeth might be really proud of him, might be shocked at him. So I thought this might be another interesting picture to kind of take a look at, all right, where it's kind of this creepy and intimate moment where she's so proud of him that she kind of wants to take him. And so that's a frightening thought, all right, that maybe this arouses literally arousal. So Lady Macbeth grabs the dagger. She leaves the stage. And Macbeth says, "They plucked out mine eyes with all great Neptune's ocean. Wash this blood clean from my hand." And then he goes on to say, "Know this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red." That there's so much blood upon Macbeth, he'll never be able to wash it. Not even an ocean could wash it. So we see that allusion to Neptune. Neptune is the god of the sea. So Macbeth is terrified at everything that has happened. All right, this has all been pretty much the most awful thing imaginable. And in the meantime, there's this knocking in the background. All right, this knock, knock, knock. And Macbeth says, "To know my deed, 'twere best know myself. Wake Duncan with thy knocking, I would thou couldst." All right, this idea that this knocking in the background would wake Duncan, and he says, "I would thou couldst." Maybe like he wishes he could wake Duncan, but because he's killed him. So the real serious scene is over, and I mean, that is serious, like heavy duty. And so Act 2, Scene 3 begins completely differently. Act 2, Scene 3 begins with the porter. And the porter is the ultimate in comic relief. All right, the comic relief would serve 2 points. All right, it would be there to lighten the mood. All right, so we definitely want to add comic relief. It's there to lighten the mood. All right, we just had a really serious and kind of terrifying scene. So there was certainly that. The comic relief might also be there to appeal to the lower class. Remember, Shakespeare wrote for an elite group of people. He wrote for kings and queens and all sorts of those kind. So appealing to the lower class would be important. Because they would be seeing his shows too, and they might not understand all of the language. So I just thought I'd include some pictures of the porter, who is this kind of overly comical character. So here's one picture, another picture. Right, I kind of like this with Hugh Grant on the cover, and so he's this really ridiculous character. Another picture. All right. So he's always portrayed as kind of bumbling and strange and peculiar. So yeah, so there's that. So those are some pictures to keep in mind of the porter. And he's drunk. Mind you, the porter is drunk, so important characters, right, for this scene. The porter, Macduff, Lennox, Malcolm, Donalbain. All right, these are going to be important characters. All right, so the first thing we want to add probably, if I could straighten this, there we go. All right, the porter, all right, adds comic relief. That he's this funny guy. So he starts with the soliloquy, and he's supposed to be the doorkeeper, all right? And he's just drunk. He's like, he thinks he's so inebriated, he thinks that he's the gatekeeper to hell. And a lot of the allusions in this are extremely sexual in nature. It's over the top. When we listened to it, it was just one heck of a potty mouth after another. And it's funny. It's genuinely funny. And so he answers the door for Macduff. All right. Finally, he breaks out of his drunkenness, and Macduff appears. And Macduff is the Thane of Fife. Right? And he's going to be one of the more important characters. Lennox is also there. He's a less important character, but he does add some important information to the story. All right. So Macduff answers, and he's like, "What took you so long, buddy? Why are you taking so long to answer?" And he says, "I was drunk, or I was drinking." He says, Macduff says, "Was it so late, friend, ere you went to bed, that you do lie so late? Why were you so late?" And he says, "Faith, sir, we were carousing till the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things, all right? I was drinking." And so, of course, the question is, well, what three things does drinking cause? All right, and the porter says, nose painting, sleep, and urine. And so, nose painting is when you drink, all right, and this goes for more fair-skinned people. When they drink, their face turns red, so that's what he means by nose painting. Sleep, drinking naturally makes you sleepy. And urine, it makes you have to urinate. It has to go to the bathroom. And then he goes on to talk about lechery. Lechery is... Act 2, Scene 4 begins with Ross and an old man, all seemingly non-consequential. The only thing you need to know about Ross, Ross is the Thane of Ross. He was named after the location he was born in. Alright, so keep that in mind. The old man begins with 70. A score is the equivalent to 20. This is my big cross-curriculum thing with math. Alright. So, a score is 20. Alright, so you should be able to solve an equation. If you have an equation that looks like this, you know, 3 score, who knows, plus 15, you should be able to solve that. Alright, now that you know a score is 20. So, if a score is 20 times 3, 20, 40, 60, plus 15 is 75. Alright, so be able to identify what a score is. So he says 3 score and 10 I can remember. 70 years ago I can remember. And they're talking about kind of the strange weather. And he says, this old man says, "I saw some of the strangest things. I saw a mousing owl hawked at, and it killed a falcon." All right, and that's a strange moment because owls are much smaller than falcons. And so we have this moment where the small kills the big. Obviously, we have strong, what we call symbolism, right? That the small thing shouldn't kill the big thing. All right, the owl represents the smaller person, which is Macbeth, and the falcon, the big bird, represents Duncan. So the smaller should not kill the bigger. And all sorts of nature is acting weird. They talk about horses that are like cannibalizing each other. So all these terrifying things. We also find out, all right, and this makes total sense. Macduff comes into the scene for just a quick moment, and he says, Malcolm and Donalbain fled, which we know, all right? The sons flee. Now, we know the sons flee because they're afraid they're going to get killed. But to an outlooker, if their father was just killed and then the sons run away, they are going to be, using his quote, they are suspicion of the deed. That they think they did it. All right. Why else would they run away? All right. So now the fault lies not just on the guards, but maybe Malcolm and Donalbain. So we have that. We also find out that sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. All right. So Macbeth is going to become King of Scotland. Some people always ask, well, why him? Well, he is the Thane of 2 locations. So that makes him a good target. Alright, so there we go. Alright, the artwork was supported online by a person whose username was Catalan. So there's that, and all my photos come copyright of Cambridge Press. And that's that. We're now in the climax of the story, or leading to the climax of the story once we enter Act 3. So we have to see what kind of crazy things go on further. The last thing, of course, download the notes. All right, I go over all of this on the notes, but this is always a good way to kind of give yourself a nice refresher. So Act 3 will be posted soon, and continue reviewing, ask questions, and be sure to watch other videos, including the Act 1 video as well as the meter video, and all are posted online on my website.